Okay, next then, councillors, is Aladdin's Road, is the Byron Bay workers issue paper, and that's with Councillor Spooner.
Happy to second.
Sorry, no, she got the previous one. Councillor Lyon second.
Thanks, Councillor Lyon. Councillors, where to start? Economically, Byron Bay is booming. You could say the winners are grinners. They're maybe sipping margaritas at sunset. While on the other hand, the losers are probably drinking lemonade and getting the bus out of town. Economic activity is going up, but the number of local workers living in our area is going down. We do have a housing crisis that's being fueled, and I'll use this term, by a class crisis in the Byron Shire. Blue collar and pink collar workers are being pushed out while no collar workers are moving in. How much do you need to live affordably in the Byron Shire now? You need to earn $100,000 or more than $100,000 a year. And that figure is contained in this report. Home ownership is down in the Byron Shire, while we've seen Instagram influencers and A-listers rocking in. And look, when I consider this topic and this issue at the moment, a really inconvenient question comes to my mind. Have we cultivated the perfect conditions to create an enclave for the rich and famous? Is there a positive correlation between blocking developments in the Byron Shire and rising house prices? Yes, there is. And has the wealth of property owners increased? Yes, it has. But should we be doing more for affordable and diverse housing? And the answer is clearly yes, we should be. And by the way, after probably having too many glasses of champagne last night, I want to congratulate Miss Burt for writing the most sobering report I think I've read in my 8 years as a councillor. However, I do fully support all the recommendations, and I sincerely hope the angels are with us in encouraging the state government to provide the funds that this council desperately needs to combat the decline of key worker housing in the Byron Shire that this report talks about. And there's lots of stats in this report, heaps of stats. But this morning, I had the opportunity to have a coffee with two hospitality workers from Byron Bay, one who's been living in the area for over 20 years. It was a fascinating discussion about their experience of this, their direct experience of what is the human story behind these numbers. And the main takeaway was this for me, when one of them said, it's not just that housing is so expensive, there's just nowhere to live. And I'd hope that comment can sink in, not just for us, but for the people we want to talk to in the state government. Our workers don't have places to live anymore. That means we are failing as a community, and everyone, even the rich and famous, need to heed the message here and change what's going on. So good luck with things in pushing this forward. And thank you for compiling, while it's a sobering report, I think it's a very good one. Thank you.
I'm going to speak again so I can speak, and I'm happy to open it up because let's face it, there aren't many more issues that are more important. First of all, I do disagree a little. I understand the sentiment, but I do disagree a little bit with Councillor Njai about the word crisis, because I have a different interpretation of crisis. When I think of a water crisis or a population crisis or a climate crisis, they are all long-term growing things. But when they become a crisis is when they're beginning to disintegrate how we live. When they're actually destructive, when they're actually bursting out to such a degree that it cannot be controlled. And there is no guarantee it'll be fixed. And that's what we're in. That's why it is a crisis. Because yes, it's been a slow burn, but it has now accelerated to the degree that if I could say there's only one flaw in this document, is that the statistics and the data in a lot of it is now 4 years old, and it would be far more sobering than in reality of 2021 using that. So it's, if anything, it's gentler and softer than what the stark realities are. So we are in a crisis because after a slow burn of unaffordability, it is exploding to the point where it's not just homeless people right on the fringe, it is people who have got full-time jobs and have got their kids in schools who are now also getting smashed, and we are disintegrating as a community, and there is no guarantee it's going to be fixed. And that's the concern I have. It's a great report, and I think what it does do is make us, I think, commit ourselves as a community and as a council as to how we're going to embrace it. And the Bruns DA that's never even got to us yet is a perfect case in point. Because I still see in this debate about that, there's 4 words that I think we have to find a way to educate our community, because our media is failing us on it, and we need to educate people to have a conversation. The 4 words we need to reconsider is greed, affordable, developer, and community. And what actually do we mean by these? It's so easy to say, oh, that's just greed. People have been greedy. And these developers are making these massive monsters and the community doesn't want it. And that's not affordable. I think all of these things need to be unpicked. Because while we still keep talking like that, we will fail our community to deliver. Yes, more stock won't be the silver bullet, but no stock is a sure way of disaster. So affordable, yes, if we look at something like a Bruns example, yes, that person is living in their car and is on welfare and needs social housing. Can I please get 2-minute extension? Thanks, Councillor Njai, put that to the vote, all in favour. Yes, that person won't go into a place like that. And so, yes, it's not affordable for that person who needs ultimately social housing. But for that couple that Councillor Spooner just described, it is affordable. And it lets them stay in the community and they will rent it out in a heartbeat. So it doesn't fail the community test because it's not affordable and that the greedy developer is going to make a profit. Who cares how much profit they make? Developer is someone who creates something. It can be positive or negative. We've got to stop making it a D word like devil or demon, for God's sake. We've got to grow up. We've got to acknowledge there's nuance in affordability and stop talking about, unless it's $200 a week less, it's not affordable. We need to stop talking about the community, because here's a question. Could it be argued that a community who live in a quiet street and say, I don't want this happening in my street because I didn't buy here to keep it like this, for it to change, is that a form of greed? Or are they just wanting things not to change? I don't know the answers, but I think we need to have a more nuanced conversation than how we're dealing with it. And that's why I think reports like this are so important, because it is the workers who are in very flexible, very fluid, very, in a sense, insecure jobs in the best of times. And they need a place to live. And they would kill to be able to pay $500 a week for a one better. They'd kill for it. They'd rather it's 300. But they'd pay 500 at a heartbeat. So we've got to stop denying them that, because a developer's going to make money and the community on the same street doesn't want more people on their street. We need to balance it. And until we can find a way to truly balance it, we are going to struggle. We're going to let people who have got fear on either side dominate the debate. And we as councillors are going to increasingly have a lack of courage to push through and face that flak. Our community and those, in this particular case, our key workers, need us to lead the way. Speech against.
I'll speak. Oh,
Speech either way. Who wants to speak? Who wants to speak next? Question, Councillor Hackett.
I want to question the Mayor. I was listening to everything you were saying there. Byron Bay originally was definitely a working class town. And when I was a young girl in the early 1900s, probably 40% of it was, I am going to ask a question, was social housing during the war years. So in the speech that you just made, I didn't hear much mention of social housing, which is mentioned in this report. And I think that's the greatest need, not low-cost housing, but we do need to really rebuild our social housing stock. So were you sort of, by not mentioning that, I was concerned that you were sort of leaving it off the list, and I think it's key to keeping our community here.
Oh, look, Councillor, it's a good point. I am a massive supporter of social housing, and these are the things that, rather than smash council, people could be using their energy to lobby state governments and actually create it. Absolutely. Social housing in particular for those who are, when we talk about social housing, it's normally those who are at the very low socioeconomic bracket. I guess key workers in a lot of cases wouldn't qualify for social housing because they're earning enough. So for me, there are just different segments of our population who need housing security. And for those who are right at that unsafe and dangerous end of becoming homeless, absolutely we need social housing. My point really was, rather than wait for that, and currently right now neither of the old parties are even talking about it, that's potentially 5 or 10 years. And again, if the ALP can come on board like the Liberals, the ALP in Victoria seem to be starting to do, that'd be awesome. What I'm talking about is us as a community and as a council in the immediate term, when things come to us, not wishing them away or wishing it was something else, confronting what's in front of us, how do we respond? But social housing would be wonderful, of course.
It's just that we were very dependent on social housing, and when you tie it together with community, we're losing so much community unless we push now, hand in hand with affordable housing, but to restock.
And Councillor, actually, John McKenna from North Coast Community Housing released the information that their sector just released, calling on, I think it was 5,000 social houses a year for the next 10 years, so 50,000. And he broke it down to the Northern Rivers region, that if we got our share, which I think was something like 300 a year for 10 years, the hundreds of millions of dollars of economic stimulus that would have in this community, apart from a place to live, all our trades, all the money would stay here. So on all of those levels, it would be massive. And I think any government of any persuasion that did it would be honoured for it.
It just, if I may.
Are we in,
Sorry, so
are
we're
we
speaking-
in conference or are we?
against?
I was speaking, I would like.
Just
I thought-
speeches. I was just answering a question. So Councillor Cameron can go next, and then we can.
Yeah, look, I'd like to just reiterate some of the points that have already been made, and I don't want to sort of repeat them in detail. This is a fantastic report because it's data rich and it's really trying to examine the way that things are in our community. And for me, it's also comprehensive. I mean, I was really pleased to see that it wasn't just a narrow focus on, say, the planning issues as they relate to affordability and access to housing. I mean, things like the transport situation was also included in this. But for me, I think the most important thing about this report is the recommendations, because it actually is using the data collected from our community, acknowledging what's going on there, and recognising that the policy framework that hangs over this, and it's, you know, the state planning policies to a large extent, attitudes towards and approaches towards things like short-term holiday letting, etc. That rather than just say, oh, well, you know, they tell us what to do, we can't do anything, it's actually doing the opposite. It's saying, no, we really need to challenge those policy frameworks. And these recommendations are about bringing those policy initiators and makers and those that apply the policy and bringing them to our community and asking them to have a genuine look around our community to look at the data, look at the problems as we see them, and to try and get some changes in that policy framework. You know, this is what we need to be doing on so many fronts. You will have heard me going on about these sorts of themes in transport and infrastructure. Well, I just think here's the perfect example of it. I think it's really fantastic the way that the recommendations have been framed here. So again, I hope we can all support it.
Councillor Curry.
Look, I didn't have much to add to this, but it was really this notion of talking about greed and developer and what that means. I think the issue is not that people see developer as a necessarily a bad word all the time. We're approving developments in this Shire and some are more palatable than others. But I think that what is at issue, and again, people profit all the time. That's the nature of business, it's the nature of commerce. There's no harm in profit. But the reality is, from what are they profiting? And we're actually looking at people profiting from by causing the suffering of others. You know, we are losing, as has already been said, the corrosion to our communities, to our streets. You know, I walk Byron streets at night and there are whole streets that have no lights on at a time when you would expect it because nobody is there. So I think that we are in a position of fear at the moment with because the things that the mechanisms that, you know, we had in place to create this beautiful place have worked against us. We've created something that we didn't want. And I think I'm really grateful that this paper has been drafted, and I thank staff for doing that. But, you know, bearing in mind that, you know, some developers, that one that we mentioned earlier, didn't get the immediate response they wanted and took us to the Land Environment Court. So, you know, it's the roads, are they good intentions therefore in putting us into a position where we actually have to have something decided by the, you know, where people are seeking to decide things by the court. I think we can't expect people to do things out of the good of their hearts in terms of providing accommodation, but there is a question of, you can be a developer and not just make it about making mega profits, which of course the short-term holiday letting is creating. A lot of this new housing is turning into de facto holiday accommodation as soon as it's, you know, off the plan. So we can't do anything about it, but we can actually say we don't like it, and it's reasonable to say we don't like it. So I think that, you know, this constellation, we are pushing excrement up the proverbial hill to some extent. I'm really grateful that we're trying to find ways around it, because the current ways aren't working. So I don't want to carry on with more stuff that everybody's already said, but I just wanted to make that point that some people do things for the good of the community, and others, it's just about money.
Anyone else wish? Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, if I can put a thing, I've been pretty disciplined sitting here, not making a noise. It's my turn. I think we've got the problem that we haven't recognised we haven't got enough houses. We just haven't got enough. And we're not making it easy to get more. West Byron's a good example. God, how many hoops have they got to go through? And then when we're finished, we're getting a whole lot more houses than we would have if we got in the first place, because they've got to try and justify the cost of it. We have to, as a council, recognise that we don't have enough supply. In the supply, we need to work out what the balance should be. Then we're starting to do our job properly. But at the moment, we're difficult to do business with. We're difficult. And the shortage of houses means that some quite unexpected demographics are benefiting from it, and others are paying an enormous price. And I think we have to focus on the issue and accept the fact that there's going to be some people disagree with it. There's going to be some people that agree with it. And to think that a developer should do it for the good of the community, that's a big ask. That's a big ask. No one else does it. They all do it because they've got some benefit. They either like it or it's rewarding financially or whatever way. But the motive here is that as a community body, we need to identify it's not a crisis until you start to ignore it. A problem, like a bit like a fire, you know, if you get there early enough, you can put it out with your foot. But if you don't, and you're not ready, you've got a major fire on. You've got all sorts of things that work against in trying to get that fire out. It's the same with housing. If we had addressed this some time ago, but we did everything to try and stop development. All that, we had a moratorium for a lot of years. That's all crap. That didn't work for us. We got a totally different outcome. And I think someone ought to be on the bridge of the ship. And if it isn't us, I don't know who it is. We can invite Melinda Pavian, we can invite Rob Stokes, we can invite who we like. Prime Minister, the Queen, Trumpy, anyone. They're not going to solve it for us. We're going to have to come up with what we want and go get them to do it. That's what we have to do. We're not going to be let out of this. We're going to have to get out of this mire ourselves. If it is to be, it's up to me. And we're going to do it because no one else is going to.
Anyone else? We'll go Councillor Njai, and then you've got a highly sought after seconder's right of reply.
I was going to try and stay quiet. Councillor Hunter, we hear this way too often, that you just say no and so there's no housing available. We have over-delivered on every target we've been set by the Department of Housing on the amount of houses that we have approved. If you look at the snapshot that's done annually, which showed 0 affordable properties available in the Byron Shire, our median price had gone up 26% in the last 12 months. They identified in that paper the shortfall of housing in the area was approximately 3,000. Funnily enough, if you look at how many on Airbnb, inside Airbnb, we're sitting at close to 4,000 properties available all year long that have been taken out of our housing market by no fault of our own. So to say that it's all our fault, there are times where we've said no to things, and I think we have the right to say no to bad development. And I do my best to say yes to good development and encourage it where possible. Because I think, you know, we do need to increase density in certain areas. We do need to work with developers and have and not see it as an us and them issue. But when you have something that has been taken completely out of our control and has taken our residential stock, which was set aside to provide housing for our community, for our workers, for our single mothers, for our elderly people, and that is now predominantly being used as holiday housing. That is not our fault. We are doing everything we can to address it, to bring in whatever levers we can to regulate it. But these figures do not reflect on us. They reflect on a state government that has not been paying attention. They get too much carrot and not enough stick. They get the turnover of all the stamp duty of all the properties going. They get the federal government get the taxes that come in now because it's all regulated from their point of view. So they're sitting pretty. But here at a local level on the ground, we are short houses. And as you can see in these results, it's, you know, over 63% of those key workers are women. A lot of them, 22% of our population are women over 55. And I'm not saying it's just a female problem, but I'm just saying we have to understand who we're hurting when we're giving away all these carrots, because the stick's falling on people that did nothing to ask for that problem. And we're doing what we can to address it. And I'm really, you know, proud of our council that we're doing that. These statistics, I think, as was pointed out, are dated. The problem's worse than is here. And, you know, we can take some responsibility, sure, but the bulk of that falls on successive state and federal governments have ignored this issue.
Second is right of reply.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Look, this is going to be a bit scattergun, but there's a number of things that I'd make note of. And firstly, this might be a bit controversial, but 200 years ago we came in, we were rich and we were powerful, and we displaced the entire community. Have we learned anything in that time? Are we going to allow that to happen again? Or are we going to do something about it? Because it just seems to me we're going to let history repeat itself. Look, firstly, another one, affordability has always been an issue in this Shire, that's true, but not like this. I mean, only 10 years ago, they couldn't sell blocks in Tallowood. There were blocks there for 180 grand, they couldn't get rid of them. They were just sitting there, Last time Tallow went up recently, under an hour, they all went. The last subdivision went within an hour for 480 grand a pop just for the land. So we are in a crisis. Things have changed, things are moving rapidly. The statistics that we're getting every 5 years, we need to do something about getting those every year. We need to get those more regularly, and we need to declare this as a housing crisis up and down the coast, and we need to then look at what that means. And that means we need to be on top of the statistics. We need to be on top of what's going on. We need to know how many people we need to look after here. A key worker in a tourist town is practically everyone. It's your baristas, your waiters, your retail assistants, it's your cleaners, it's your teachers, it's everyone, pretty much, except maybe the people that are buying in from the cities and working from home. Rough sleepers, second highest in the state, just two people under 200, 198 people, and that's at that end. And that is a reflection of what's going on all the way up the chain. If there is that many people, and we've done great things on the streets, we've assisted people with our homeless liaison officers, and helped during the COVID times. We've helped heaps of people off the street, but they've been replaced, and it's increased by another 20, 25 people. And that's indicative of what's going on all the way up the chain. So yeah, the Airbnb, the availability, gone. So then the next rung down, so people that are moving, that were in that accommodation, that are now having to pay more, and then the people that are under that level of accommodation are now having to pay more, and then eventually everyone's getting forced out. Everyone's getting into a higher rental stress. It's exactly what's going on. There's the mental health impacts. People say, well, just move. If you can't afford to live here, move. Well, move where? What if your kids are in school? What about all the time you've invested in your community? Doesn't that count for something? You have a right to stay. You have a right to remain with your friends and your family and your community that you've invested in. We need to provide that. We can't, can I get an extension?
Move 1 minute, 2 minute extension. Second, Councillor Khoury, put that to the vote. All in favour.
The mental health impacts alone on that are going to cause costs down the system anyway. I mean, we need to look at this holistically. And it's not about moving to where the work is. People have got jobs here. They just can't afford to live here. And that's having economic impacts on our businesses. Businesses all around the Shire can't find staff at the moment. And there's some comments online, well, wages will increase and the market will take care of it. The market won't take care of it. Wages might increase a little bit because businesses are desperate, and so their margins will get hit a little bit. But what will happen is people will just suffer more and more. The rental stress will increase. People will make ends meet somehow, but they will be under extreme stress to do so. Wages might increase a touch, but not much. What will happen is the gap between rich and poor will increase. It will widen, and it's going on right now, and it will continue to go on. I was getting a haircut the other day. The hairdresser bought a duplex in Suffolk Park, 600 grand 5 years ago, was offered 1.4. He got a call, interrupted my haircut, got a call, got offered 1.65 million to move. This is, and this is what's going on daily. It is a crisis, and it is getting worse and worse and worse. And we haven't seen the worst of it. And we need to act, and we need to act now. You made a good point there, Mayor, about developers. And I think it's really important that we understand that we can't be naming and shaming landlords and making them the problem. And I respect and I am grateful for every landlord that doesn't charge what they could charge and that does look after their tenants and only charges what they need. But the solution is not to bang on about landlords and the owners of properties and making them charge affordable rates. That's not where we need to come in at this. We need to come in at this with social housing, council housing, access to land, and ensuring that we can remove speculation from these places that we build and that we look after the key workers that are otherwise going to leave our shire.
And right of reply.
Thanks, Matt. And thanks, councillors, for engaging in this conversation today. Crisis has been used a lot. I would suggest we don't just have a crisis of housing. We are really confronting a crisis of survival for a lot of people in our community. I just want to reply to some of the things that have been raised. Councillor Hackett talked about social housing and low-cost housing. This is not a choice between housing. Housing happens on a ladder, and a community needs to provide all the rungs of that ladder. So from low cost right through to expensive housing is appropriate. It's about a holistic, sustainable housing for our community approach. And so, yes, we are way behind on the average for social housing in this area. That needs to be fixed. That's a state government responsibility. They need to fix it. In terms of holiday letting, a word of caution, and I'm going to, with a nod to a wonderful ex-Labor Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, make this statement. Holiday letting, it explains some things about the affordability crisis, but it doesn't explain everything. So just if holiday letting goes away, our affordability issue does not go away. So don't see it as a silver bullet in terms of solving this. But councillors, I want to put a question to the councillors who will be sitting in these chairs in September this year, because we know this approach takes a long time to solve. So it's not us who will be solving it, it will be them. And our community needs to know something. They need to know which side of the fence the councillors they're voting for are going to be on in terms of this, and especially in regards to what council can do. We have Lot 22 in Mullumbimby tagged for affordable housing. We have the Mullumbimby Hospital site tagged for affordable housing, hopefully to deliver somewhere between 200 and 300 homes for locals. All the candidates who are standing in the next council election, will they support council going forward to create housing on those sites? That's where the rubber hits the road. And people who are voting for those councillors need to know the answer to that question, because this will become a huge, just as big an issue in the next term of council. But what is the answer then? The answer is yes, they should be supporting that. They should be doing it via the creation of a land trust for this council, a land trust created for the people of the Shire by council, so that those pieces of land can be protected in perpetuity against the market forces that push up prices. And the second thing they need to do is to make sure there's an increase in housing density within the Shire, because if we don't increase the density, we will never get any more housing, because we don't want to greenfield sites. They're the two strategies that will ensure that we do have some housing provided for our locals, the ones who are suffering at the moment. And Councillor Lyon is dead right. This ain't just a housing issue. It's impacting people's mental health. Their health is being impacted. We need to take care of our people by taking care of housing. This is, Maslow's hierarchy of need. You need to have safe, secure housing first before you can grow and flourish with anything else. And we know that we are failing. And finally, just to finish off, words do not build houses. I'm going to repeat that again. Words do not build houses, actions do. I was part of a housing summit or a housing conference a number of years ago that was put on for our community. And I was conscious of all the reports that have been written over decades now in terms of housing in the Byron Shire. And I put out a challenge in that housing conference. And I said, build one house in 1 year. 1 year, one house, just to see what happened, if there could be an affordable house. And there was one built. It wasn't built by council. It was built by a developer. that came to the party. It is possible. We should not be scared of partnerships, because while the land trust by council is an important ingredient here, we will need partners along the way, the state government and the developers who have the know-how to do this. But the important question is, where do people stand on this? Thanks very much.
Let's put that to the vote. Those in favour? All in favour?